Yo, what's going on, guys? Today I want to talk about my favorite league starter, Toxic Rain. So I have been playing this build for the past 5 leagues and I am quite confident that it did survive the patch 3.15 nerfs, so it's still going to be really good. Obviously every single build is nerfed, but Toxic Rain actually hasn't been nerfed by that much, so it still should be really good. So first I will show you the example map. After that I will talk about leveling, then some early mapping, endgame setup, and at the end I want to talk about all of the nerfs that this build suffered from. So example map, I'm just gonna do a quick city square. So Toxic Rain is really good league starter because it is very versatile, so you can make it deal pretty good single target. It's never gonna be really amazing for bosses, but it can do all of them. It has some good clear, you can make it move much faster, you can also make it really good blight map farmer, simulacrum farmer, heist farmer, and so on. So it is very versatile. So for bosses you always spawn the totems, so they apply wither stacks to deal increased single target damage. So that was the map boss, and let me just show you a bit more clear. So Mirage Archer is clearing a bit behind you, and Toxic Rain is also slowing monsters, so it gives you a bit of defense. And for moving skills I am using Blink Arrow with Dash. Blink Arrow is not being nerfed, but Dash is being nerfed a bit, so I might use Flame Dash instead of normal Dash, so we're gonna have to see how it feels. So that was it. So now let's talk about leveling, and let me show you the POB. So for leveling you want to start as Caustic Arrow, so you get Caustic Arrow from the first quest, and then you support it with Mirage Archer and Pierce. So you start with Pierce, and after the quest with X, I believe, you get the Mirage Archer. After that, when you kill Brutus, you can get Withering Step. So the way Withering Step works, you move, and while you are moving you apply withered debuff. So this debuff increases the damage that monster take. So what you want to do when you fight boss, you start with using Withering Step, you move to the boss, and then you start damaging him. And from time to time you just activate Withering Step. After that, at level 12, so just before Merveil, you will get your Toxic Rain, and then you can swap to Mirage Archer with Void Manipulation, so both of these gems. And for Forling you will add Vicious Projectiles, and then eventually Efficacy, Concentrated Effect, and Empower. And Empower 4 is actually very powerful after the nerfs to all of the other gems, so it's really important to get it, and I expect Empowers to be really expensive. Also, after the nerfs, the Efficacy is actually really good right now, so previously we would not use Efficacy. Now with Empower I would start using Efficacy instead of Void Manipulation. So before you get the Empower you would use Void Manipulation, and after that you swap to Empower. Valgrace is really good for defense, just use it on cooldown and it gets pretty much dodge cap. Here are movement skills. You might want to consider using Second Wind to get additional charges for Dash and Blink Arrow, but now it reduces cooldown recovery rate, so it's a choice if you want more charges or you want them to recover faster. I personally think I will still use Second Wind, but we're gonna have to see. For the auras, I like Skitterbots with Malevolence, and you can also use Enlighten to reserve a bit less mana. Usually you will get Despair from Ring on hit, but during leveling from Act 3 and onwards you can use Despair pretty much as a self-cast just on bosses. And eventually you will also get the Wither totem setup. So you use spell totems, you spawn 2 totems instead of 1, and this totem will cast Wither supported with faster casting, and Wither increases the chaos damage that monster take. Okay, so in terms of tree, here is the Act 1 tree. So you start here, you take some increased damage and chaos damage. After that you go to the right, take some even more chaos damage multiplier, and then you go straight to the top. And here is a bit of decision making. Do you want to take life, projectiles, some damage and some damage here, or you want to go straight to the elusive? And I actually like to just take these damage nodes and then go just straight up to elusive, because elusive actually increases your movement speed by a lot, so it helps a lot with leveling. And after I take this, then I take damage nodes, life, a bit damage, and these damage over time nodes. And as an Ascendancy, I actually like leveling with Deadeye. So pretty much all of the Ascendancy of the Ranger are really good, and also the Trickster. But I think during leveling, Deadeye is the best, simply because you get free Tailwind from Gathering Winds. So that increases your both attack speed and movement speed by a lot. So I really like leveling as Deadeye. Then after that you will go to the right side, take some dodge nodes, take damage, life, and you will circle around here. And after you take these life nodes, you can remove all of these damage nodes, so you save some of the points. And thanks to these points, you can go all over here, take some damage and movement speed. These nodes are actually not that effective in terms of damage, but they also give you some evasion, movement speed, and cooldown recover rate of movement speed, so it is actually pretty good node. Here you get some increased skill effect duration, which is really good for Toxic Rain, and some life. And as your second Ascendancy point, you take increased amount of Mirage Archer, but they will stand in place instead of moving with you. So it is both good and bad node. It is really good because it increases your overall single target damage when you are fighting bosses, because you can spawn 3 of them. But at the same time, it is really good to have moving turret on you when you are clearing maps and leveling, so you don't have to shoot as often. But at the same time, you can just shoot once from time to time, and you leave Mirage Archer behind you, and he will keep shooting behind you. So it is both good and bad, but overall it should be pretty nice in terms of damage. After that, at level 70, you just take some additional life points. Here you take Wind Dancer for additional survivability, and some life nodes here. And you can, instead of going through these points, you can go here, take some additional damage and life. And your third Ascendancy will be Endless Munition, and this is also pretty good for Toxic Rain, especially for clearing. So I think right now I should explain how Toxic Rain works with increased AoE and additional projectors, because there is a lot of confusion with it, and to be honest, I am still even a bit confused with it. So when you shoot Toxic Rain, there will be few pods that spawn, and they will be dealing damage constantly in the area around them. So you don't care about the damage part of the Toxic Rain that is based on attack. So when there is an impact and when there is explosion, you only care about the damage over time part of the skill, and this damage is being applied while the pods are on the ground in this AoE. So when there is a boss, let's say here in the middle, these pods would overlap, so all 3 of them would deal damage to the boss, so these would not deal damage. So naturally you would want to increase your AoE, so the pods would have increased AoE, but in last league it was nerfed, and now if you increase your AoE, the arrows that you shoot will spawn more spread out. So as you can see, there's one over here and so on. So if you invest in AoE, you will actually not increase your single target damage, but you will still increase your clear because you will be shooting in bigger range. And in terms of projectiles, it actually works the same way. So the more projectiles you have, the more spread out they will be. But I still believe there is a little bit of RNG where the pods spawn. So I think overall increases to projectile and AoE does slightly increase your single target damage. Not by a lot, but it still is pretty good investment. And it is also really good for increasing your clear. So it is not a dead stat like a lot of people say. It's just not that great for single target. If you care about clear speed and just clearing bigger area, you should still invest in AoE and in projectiles. And it for sure does not decrease your single target damage. So just 3-2 projectiles at the start of the league without any investment is pretty good. So the last levels, eventually you will get Thread of Hope, so you can take this increased duration, some attack movement speed and free charges, also some life here. And there isn't actually that many good nodes for this build. You can start taking some flask effectiveness and charges here and here, especially since there will be less flask charges gained this league, so these nodes are actually really good. So here, here and here. And if you need some mana, since mana flask has been nerfed, you can also take Arcane Chemistry for increased mana recovery from flask. So it is really good idea to invest into cluster jewels as soon as possible. So here is a setup with cluster jewels with endgame setup. So you want tempering arrowheads on your large cluster jewel, and this is the damage over time with bow. And this actually got nerfed. Instead of 10% damage over time multiplier, you get 6, but it's still pretty good. And most of the time, this node will be over here, and to force it to spawn here, so you actually can take less points, you need to have arcing shot. So for some reason there is some kind of like positioning priority for them. So tempered arrowheads have really high priority for it to be here, and the only way to push it over here is to have arcing shot, and there is not a single second good point to have on large cluster jewel, so you only care about tempered arrowhead, and eventually you can also get one with arcing shot to force it for this position. For medium cluster jewels, you want Student of Decay, which wasn't nerfed, and Wicked Pole, which also wasn't nerfed. I also like to have one Brush with Deft to get 1% life on kill, and this one got nerfed. Instead of 10% you get 5% damage over time multi, and also one Eternal Suffering for faster wither charges. So if you are mapping, you're not gonna be using totems, so you will be withering with your own attacks up to 5 wither debuffs, and on bosses you still will be applying some of the wither stacks yourself, up to 5 stacks, and after that your totem can start applying them. So at the point when you're gonna do Uberlap, I would swap into the Pathfinder. So you would take Nature's Reprisal for some chaos damage, Nature's Adrenaline for movement speed and attack speed, Nature's Boon for flash charges, and Master Alchemist, which actually got nerfed. So now instead of being immune to elements, now you remove any element when you use a flask. But since you are a Pathfinder, you will be using it very often, and with new Enkindling Orb, you can make your flask to be automatically used when you get ignited, chilled, frozen, or shocked, so you can automatically be immune to ailment thanks to this. If you don't want ailment immunity, or you can get it somewhere else, eventually with a lot of investment you can actually get it from your gear. You can go for Master Surgeon, and this way you can get bleed immunity and you get 6% life when you use any of the flasks. So Deadeye, in my opinion, is really good, but it falls behind in the end game, so I would swap into Pathfinder. And the Raider is actually also still really nice, especially since the nerf to Onslaught Jewel, which I'm gonna talk about later. But I haven't really played it myself, and I really like the flasks effect from Pathfinder, so I would actually stick to Pathfinder. In terms of gear, the most important item is Quill Rain. So as soon as possible you should buy Quill Rain, because in terms of damage from your weapon, you actually do not benefit from anything in terms of stats. You only care about the attack per second. So in terms of weapon, you actually should just get the base short bow, which I believe is level 5. And you actually can use it for a long time, just the white base version. If you want to, you can use some essence or alchemy and you can get increased attack speed on it. So as a base, it has 1.5 attack speed, so you can increase it to maybe 1.6 or something. So eventually you want to use Quill Rain because it has the highest amounts of attacks per second. In terms of bows, it has 3 attacks per second. So you can most of the time buy it around Act 5, maybe Act 6 for 1 to 3 chaos. So it is super cheap and you will be able to use it pretty much up until the end of the Atlas progression. Eventually you should craft the bow. I like to craft this with faceted, corroded, metallic, and jagged fossils, so 4 fossils. Again, faceted, metallic, corroded, and jagged. And this way you have a really high chance to get +2 socketed gems, and you also craft chaos damage overtime multiplier. So when you reach the maps, so for early mapping you would be using Quill Rain. You also can get Tabula Rasa for your 6th link, and that should be good for everything up until the red maps. Eventually you should buy 6th link Quill Rain, which should be pretty cheap, maybe 1, maybe 2 exalts, and then you can swap your body armor to Carcass Jack for more damage, or if you want to, you can use Kintsugi for some increased survivability. So it is a decision, do you want more damage or more survivability? I personally prefer more damage, especially after the nerfs. So the cheapest upgrade would be gloves with chaos damage overtime multiplier, which is the hunter influence. Then ring with curse enemies with despair on hit, which should be around maybe 50 chaos at the beginning of the league. And then damage overtime multiplier quiver, so 1 like this. Eventually you would also double influence your quiver with bow, attack, fire, additional arrow. The next one is Toxic Rain fires 1 additional arrow helmet chant, which will probably be priced at around 1 exalt. And also the boots with tailwind. So when you gonna swap to Pathfinder, you will lose tailwind from your Deadeye Ascendancy, so this is a good way to get it back. The next important upgrade is Dying Sun, so you get 2 additional projectiles. It is nerfed in this league, but as a Pathfinder you still should be able to have a good uptime on it. And with 50% flask effectiveness, so with Pathfinder Ascendancy plus 1, 2, 3 passive nodes, and with Conqueror Potency, which gives 8% flask effectiveness, you should be able to get 50% flask effectiveness, and this way you get, instead of 2 additional projectiles, you get 3. So this is actually a really, really good item. And the most expensive upgrade is the Watcher Eye. So I actually don't have it here. So Watcher's Eye with Malevolence. I'm gonna put it back into the build because before I release the video, with damage over time multiplier. So up to 22% damage over time multiplier while you are affected by Malevolence, and this jewel is most of the time worth around 10 to 15 exalt, so it is really expensive, but that's a big increase of damage. So you don't care about second aura, you just care about the damage over time multiplier. In terms of small jewels, you just want chaos damage over time multi and some increase life. So that's pretty much it in terms of the gems and gear. In terms of nerf, so we overall lost powers because of nerfs to gems, but pretty much every build lost some power. But with this build, actually Empower did not got nerf, efficacy actually got buffed. So also Mirage Archer has not been nerfed, so we only lost a little bit of damage on Vicious Projectile and Concentrated Effect. We will not use Void Manipulation with Empower, so only 2 gems got nerfed. So it is actually not that big of a nerf compared to some other builds. The next nerf is we no longer can get Onslaught on Jewel. So we used to be able to get Onslaught on kill with this jewel, so 3% chance to get Onslaught on kill, so now you can't get it, and the best way to get it will be through boots, the Veil mod, which gives you 20% increased movement speed and 10% chance to get Onslaught on kill. So this would be the boots I would use, and this is also why Dead Raider might be actually still really nice for this build, because you get free Onslaught, and Onslaught is big increase to your attack and movement speed. And by the way, attack speed is really, really big for Toxic Rain. So I also actually really like to use attack speed on the flask, so it is also increased by your flask effectiveness. So I have 50%, so 12%, 12 plus 6, so you actually get 18% attack speed from this flask. So this is actually really big for Toxic Rain. The next nerf, which is the biggest nerf probably, is the nerf to cluster jewels. So most of the cluster jewels now give 5% damage over time multi, and smaller ones should no longer give chaos damage over time multi. I don't know if POB is updated or it actually has not been changed, but we overall lose some chaos damage over time multiplier from cluster jewels, and Temperate Arrowheads give 6% instead of 10. So overall I would say we lose like 20, maybe 30 chaos damage over time multi, but if you're using Student of Decay and Brush with that, you're not really losing that much. The next nerf is on bow. Chaos damage over time multi is no longer suffix, now it is prefix, so it is actually a nerf to bows, because it is much easier to craft the good bow with 1 free prefix instead of 1 free suffix. So it is still possible to make this weapon, but it will be a bit harder. So most of builds lost ailment immunity, but this is also the reason why I like to go Pathfinder, because we still have it. You will no longer have it all the time, but it is still pretty much immune to ailments if you are using your flasks correctly. Next nerf is nerfed to flasks. So you might be wondering why I'm gonna play Pathfinder if flasks are overall nerfed, but it is actually the reason why I like to play Pathfinder now even more. Because if flasks are nerfed, most of the builds will not get that much from them, and especially nerfs to charges gained will make it so people will not have that big of uptime on them. But with Pathfinder, you still should be able to sustain your mana just from Mana Flask, and Mana Flask actually got a big nerf, like 66% reduced amount recovered instead of 30. So Flask effectiveness from Pathfinder is gonna help a lot with Mana Sustain. Also, you can get a lot of life recovery from your instant life flask. Jade Flood, instead of 3000 evasion rating, now gives only 3000. Only 1.5k, so this is actually probably the biggest nerf to flasks. And the second one is the nerf to movement speed roll on flasks, so instead of 30% you can get up to 8%. So with flask effectiveness from Pathfinder and the increased effect from the prefix, or is it suffix? From the increased effect mod, you lose around 30 to 40% movement speed. So these two nerfs actually hurt quite a lot, but it's not the end of the game, end of the world. It is still pretty nice. So that's pretty much it. I also can show you the second version of this build, which I am using for simulacrums. So the difference here is I am using the Elegant Hubris with Supreme Unsustentation to ignore attribute requirements, and I use the Zerfis Heart for Soul Eater when you use the Val skill, and the Val skill I use is Val Grace. And you also get items and gems have 50% increased attribute requirements, which is countered with this jewel. And this build I like for the simulacrums, since simulacrum waste lasts around 30 seconds. So for most of the time of any wave you will have Soul Eater, and it is very big buff to Toxic Rain, since Soul Eater gives you a stack of attack speed per monster kill. So you can get up to like 20 attacks per second, and Toxic Rain again gets a big boost of damage if you have a lot of attack speed. So that would be my Simulacrum farmer if I decide to do it. So I will post both POBs in the description of the video. So that's pretty much it. I'm still pretty confident it's gonna be amazing League starter build. Maybe not as great as boss killing, but for mapping and for blighted maps, simulacrums, and new league mechanic, it still should be amazing. And also, if anything goes wrong, you can still swap it to some other ranger build. So any other Pathfinder or like Deadeye or Raider. I plan to maybe swap into the new Stormrain if things go wrong and Stormrain suddenly looks like it is really good, or maybe the Concoction, the unarmed new skill of Pathfinder. So that's gonna be it for today. Make sure to subscribe and check out my Twitch channel. I'm gonna stream pretty much all day during the league start, so if you want to see how I'm gonna do during league start with this build, you can see me there. And also I'm gonna do one last practice run with this build before the league start on my stream. So thanks for watching and see you next time.